back with a little update on the Bahamas stuff. Some new information here following the video I did a couple days ago about the new fees and regulations. Before I jump into that, I kind of wanted to tell you a little funny thing I saw somebody reference on Facebook. I guess the government of the Bahamas realized they couldn't invoke or activate these new fees and regulations without removing the prior legislation. So they went through all this stuff with the bills and, you know, all the floor debate and all the rest of it, and then realized it couldn't actually go into place because it superseded the previous rules and regs that were in place. They had to move, I guess, some legislation to term or eliminate the prior structure so that the new fee structure could take place. So I thought that was pretty funny. It was a little bit of you know, cart before the horse sort of stuff. Pretty funny. But anyway, I wanted to point out today this article in the Tribune with this fella, Kerry Fontaine, who's in the picture here. Kerry is the Bahama Out Island Promotion Board executive director. So they're, I assume, like a chamber of commerce. And they've got, you know, marinas, bed and breakfast, hotels, service industry type businesses in the Abacos and down the Exumas chain, Luther, places like that, as their members. And they asked for a meeting with the government with an undisclosed representative of the government. So we don't know who that is. They didn't want to identify that person. But as they said here in this first little paragraph, they wanted the government to pause the new and increased boating fees until mid-October to, quote, save the summer season and ensure, quote, we get it right. I suspect he's responding to the wave of marina cancellations and charter cancellations and the general outrage of the boating community about this whole thing. And I got to say, in the Facebook groups, all the smart people in the cruiser community all said this is really going to hurt the Out Islands. And I guess the Out Islands feel that way also. So anyway, this guy, Kerry Fontaine, requested a meeting, had a meeting, asked the government to pause the fees. Long story short, the government hasn't announced anything yet, so they're awaiting the government's response on this. But there are a couple things that happened in this meeting that I think are worth pointing out. The first is that they're not asking for all of it to be thrown out. They like some parts of the regulations, particularly this new FDCC card, the Frequent Digital Cruising Card, which is basically a 2-year cruising permit. I didn't talk about this in my prior video. But that allows you, if you purchase this 2-year permit, to come in and out as often as you want. Not sure it's really a solution for a lot of cruisers who may be deciding to go on to different places, do different things. But certainly if you're a South Florida person and you go over there for fishing, this is probably the way to go. So anyway, there's that. They like that. The next paragraph here I think is interesting. However, the Bahamian tourism industry also recommended that the government adjust the, quote, temporary 12-month cruising permit to enable visiting boats to enter the Bahamas 4 times within that year-long period rather than being restricted to twice within a 30-day period. So this solves the problem we discussed previously about those boats transiting to the Caribbean, right? If you're taking a thorny path down there and you leave in October and you get to, you know, the Bahamas and you check in because you're going to wait for weather and provision, get gas, whatever. The way the regulations were written, you pass through. It's fine the first time through. You spend your winter in Puerto Rico, and you come back in April or May or something like that. The way the old regs were written, most people felt like that wasn't going to work because you didn't leave and come back within 30 days. So you would have had to have bought another cruising permit to come home. That's not great. So his proposal here fixes that issue. Further, and to facilitate and encourage spontaneous summer trips from Florida to the northern Bahamas, especially Bimini, the Berries, West End, and Abaco, the sector is asking that a new permit or category be created that would allow such visitors to enter this nation twice in a 90-day permit. So there's the 90-day permit back. That's what we used when we went to the Abacos. We had like 94 days on our visa to allow for weather, and it was perfect. Given what was going on with our family and our kids and all that, 90 is about all we could really afford, maybe a week or two longer, but we made 90 work. If they bring this thing back, that's great. Assuming, of course, that the cost would be what it was before, which was half of the annual permit. So in our case, it would be $250 rather than $500. I guess you'd have the anchoring fee in there for $200. Maybe they'd cut that in half too, which would be great. $100. Then there's the question of the fishing permit. So, $350 for anchoring and cruising, perhaps. It's $50 more than we paid. We paid $300. Kind of the big open question now is what's going on with fishing. If you added fishing in and they kept the anchoring at $200, you're talking about $750 for 3 months. It's still a little pricey, but it's like $1,900 if you were going to do the 1 year, right? So it's a pretty big sticker shock with that. Additionally, he says, he describes this as the meat and potatoes of what the tourism industry has proposed. Mr. Fontaine said it also recommends to the government that it avoid nickel and diming visiting vessels and their occupants by requiring them to pay separately for cruising, fishing, anchorage fees, and permits, and suggests they be consolidated into one payment. Totally agree. Totally agree. That's absolutely the right thing to do, assuming they fix the fishing. If you're on a year and you go for the $500 year permit, $200 anchoring fee, and then they tack $1,200 on for 12 months of fishing, you're at $1,900. The fishing costs are simply not competitive, and they make no sense. So I'm sorry he didn't talk about the fishing in here. Maybe some fishing association's going to do that, but that seems to me to be the last little bit here to kind of get this thing resolved. He also emphasizes that they're getting a lot of criticism of the government not really getting things right and being all screwed up. Like the thing I started with not revoking the prior legislation before passing the new regulations and all that. And there's also the perception about being interested in appealing to those types of tourists. So are you welcoming the cruising community, or does the cruising community feel like these fees are punitive? And that's a turnoff. His organization seems to think that it's important to maintain a good optics with the cruising community, right? I completely agree with that. I think that's really important. This thing came out, we looked at it and said, okay, where can we go for roughly the same cost to enter and exit next year? And we looked at the Yucatan. So, it's just a lot more affordable. Seems to be more welcoming. Seems to be more oriented around attracting that kind of tourist business. And, this article indicates that they understand that that's an issue. That's not the brand they want to have. It's not the perception they want to project about the Bahamas to the cruising community. So, that's good news. We'll see what happens with this. This doesn't mean anything's going to get passed. But I think what's important here is that there are elements of the Bahamian economy that realize this is potentially a problem to them. Apparently the Out Islands understand that there's a potential major impact here. We were hoping to go back and explore Eleuthera and the Exumas next time. We fished, caught one lobster, 8 to 10 conch, and speared a couple of lionfish, right? I didn't even spear a regular kind of sport fish. Makes no sense if that's the kind of fishing you're doing to pay the kind of fees for the fishing. So we hope that gets fixed. But the lionfish is something that really needs to be thought about too. those things need to be removed from the reefs. Everybody should be encouraged to spear and take lionfish out of the environment. But I bet you if you're going around with a pole spear and you don't have the fishing license, you're in real trouble. I'm pretty sure the environmental folks don't want that to be the case, where you're disincentivizing people from getting lionfish off the reefs. Nobody's really talking about that, but I think it's a pretty important issue for the sustainability of the reefs. Anyway, that's the update. We're going to see what happens here. It appears to be a moving target. If they put the pause on, through October, that's going to say a lot, I think. But I'm sure the government's got some pride, and they want to save face and not look like they kind of rushed this thing out. And last little thing here, I guess, this kind of sums it up. Until we get it right, let's put a pause on this. We asked for a pause because the timing could not have been more ill-placed. Friday was July 4th, the U.S. Independence holiday. It's the peak of our boating season. This was not only less than 100% clear to boaters, but also within our organizations and within the Bahamas. We asked for a pause and asked for that pause to be extended through the end of October to give us the opportunity to save our peak boating season. Save our peak boating season. It will take us time to get it right, and once we get it right, share with the boating community and all the different entities in the Bahamas, including custom officers throughout the Bahamas. I think this guy's got the right approach, but we'll see what happens. And as stuff evolves, it's interesting. I'll certainly post it. Thank you all for tuning in. Go ahead and drop your comments down in the comments box, and we'll all see this through together and see where we end up. Cheers, everybody.